What is going on, guys? It is WrestleGamia here, back with another video. Now, it might be hard to believe, but WWE Video Games have been around for over 3 decades, ranging from PC games to console games to handheld games and of course arcade games. Join us now as WrestleGamia looks at part 2 of the evolution of WWE Video Games. The expanded capabilities of 5th generation consoles such as the Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn and the PlayStation meant new possibilities for gamers, including 3D graphics and CD quality audio. Of course, not all games fully utilized these capabilities, but when they did, gamers were in for some incredible experiences. Following the success of its Mortal Kombat-esque arcade game, and to a lesser extent the console ports, the WWF followed up in 1996 with WWF In Your House, released for PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and DOS. The game was designed to emulate the gameplay of WWF Wrestlemania the arcade game, but failed to follow up on the gameplay other than adding a 4-player mode. Something just seemed unpolished with the game. It added new features such as power-ups and power-downs, but sadly, the quality just wasn't there. Acclaim Entertainment's WWF Warzone was released at the height of the Attitude Era, with this 1998 release making its way to the PlayStation, Nintendo 64 and Game Boy. This was the first WWE game to include 3D graphics, as well as another first being the Creator Wrestler mode. The game featured an impressive roster of 18 superstars, several which had to be unlocked. The game featured different attires for wrestlers, as well as the first time in any WWE video game a player could create a wrestler. The mode boasted many customizations, as well as a training mode. Warzone excelled in its gameplay as it included a variety of matches including traditional, tag team, cage, hardcore, tornado, and elimination. The N64 also included the Royal Rumble and a gauntlet match. Players could also start their superstars at the bottom and work their up to a WWF Championship match. Not surprisingly, the game was well reviewed and successful. The Game Boy version of Warzone lacked 3D graphics, featured a much more limited moveset, and didn't have Bret Hart, the Headbangers, or the unlockable characters. What it also lacked were those cheesy promos cut in a very empty big warehouse. Is anybody able to translate Ahmed's promos?
To play D, bring it on! Cause I forgot to take my medication in the morning and I'm in a real bad mood!
Following Warzone, Acclaim Entertainment released WWF Attitude, its last game for the company as the WWF dumped them for THQ. Acclaim would make ECW's Hardcore Evolution and ECW Anarchy Rules video games, which were as warmly received as the WWE's relaunch of ECW. Attitude was a direct sequel to Warzone, but there were several new features, including Career Mode, which spotlighted wrestlers working their way up from house shows to Raw, pay-per-view events, and eventually championship matches. The Creator Wrestler mode included original entrance music and allowed players to pick names for their wrestlers, as well as crowd chants and customized commentary. You would also be able to customize your own pay-per-view. You would be able to change the lights, change the ring ropes, and rename your pay-per-view to whatever you wish. It's something that didn't feature again until later SmackDown games. One of the highlights of the Attitude's Creator Wrestler system was that players could include writing on their wrestlers, allowing them to include R-rated outfits in terms of language. New matches included the First Blood match and the I Quit match. Players could also create their own stable. Commentary from Jerry the King Lawler and Shane McMahon rounded out this aspect of the game, and while it was limited, it was remarkable for its time. Fans who played this will likely remember that the game was dedicated to Owen Hart, who was a playable character before being removed before the game's release. Reviewers noted that while Attitude's gameplay was similar to Warzone, its reversal system had been upgraded. It was a worthy follow-up to Warzone, and if you enjoyed that, chances are you enjoyed Attitude. The only negative was those convoluted controls. Like, just in order to do a body slam, the player would have to insert 32 button combinations, but that's something that would be fixed later on in the series. The game was released on Game Boy Color, followed by PlayStation and Nintendo 64. Even the Sega Dreamcast got a port a few months later. The Dreamcast version would be relatively similar, except for having upscale graphics. The new millennium, yes, we know 2001 was the real millennium as there was no number 0, but just go with it, brought in an incredible number of new WWE games, including an arcade game, a new series, and one of the most revered wrestling games in video game history. WrestleMania 2000 was THQ's first game for the WWF. The World Wrestling Federation kicked longtime partner Acclaim to the curb after THQ's success with its WCW games. And THQ didn't reinvent the wheel with WrestleMania 2000, relying on its game engine from WCW NWO Revenge and adding some fun features. The game featured over 50 WWE superstars, the popular creator-wrestler mode, and a program where a wrestler battled their way from being a rookie to progress to various championships, finally getting their chance to work at WrestleMania 2000. One drawback to the storyline feature was that storylines did not branch out, regardless whether a wrestler won or lost. The creator-wrestler portion was memorable because templates allowed players to create versions of WCW wrestlers, including Goldberg, Randy Savage, and Kevin Nash. The only limit on building a roster was the limited number of slots, but with unlockable characters such as Jerry the King Lawler, Stephanie McMahon, Jim Ross, and others, even a Ho, it also featured rare appearances in wrestling games such as Michael Hayes and Shawn Stasiak's Meat character. WWF Wrestlemania 2000 was released for N64 and Game Boy Color, and it was well received. 2000 was just getting started, however, and THQ released SmackDown, the first in a long line of wrestling games for the PlayStation 1. Designed by Ukes, the game featured a detailed and extensive season mode where a wrestler improved their character over time. The PlayStation game was popular for its easy-to-master control system, fast-paced gameplay, and good graphics. The game featured a number of match types with surprising detail. For example, the I Quit match required you to stick the microphone in your opponent's face to see if they'd had enough. The biggest downside to the game was its sound, which was average at best.
Give up.
The second was a bizarre feature where instead of unlocking new characters, the game unlocked body parts for different wrestlers that could be used to assemble them in the Creator Wrestler section. A bit odd, but the game proved popular enough to warrant sequels. But after a long absence from the arcades, the WWF introduced WWF Royal Rumble, an arcade game where a player could compete in an exhibition mode or the Royal Rumble. Sega produced the arcade game, which featured a player taking a partner for exhibition mode. There, one of your wrestlers competed in the ring, while the other was on hand to provide outside interference. Of course, the main feature of the game was a Royal Rumble mode, with the player having to eliminate the opposition within a certain time limit. However, each time they eliminated an opponent, they received extra time on their clock and bonus time for more difficult opponents. It's pretty odd that the main feature of the game was a Royal Rumble, but there weren't even more than 15 wrestlers on the roster. That meant that doubles would come out more than once. Both the Exhibition and Royal Rumble mode featured a super meter that charged up over matches. Once full, it allows a player to instantly recover from pins or escape a Rumble elimination. While THQ produced a console version for the Dreamcast, it was not well received as it featured a much smaller roster than the arcade game. Hell, they didn't even take the timer out, and gamers complained that its two modes greatly limited gameplay. But anyone who doubted the popularity of PS1 SmackDown need look no further than the sequel's release the same year as the original and its incredible sales. WWF SmackDown 2 Know Your Role launched in late November 2000, just 7 months after SmackDown. The game picked up where the original left, adding more matches such as a ladder match, Iron Man match, table, and Hell in a Cell. Although the Hell in a Cell was rightly criticized for being a bare-bones version of the hellacious structure. In fact, it just looked like a cage with a roof on top. Still, the game boasted a deep roster as well as the ability to create wrestlers with moves from other promotions' stars, expanding the number of wrestlers available. The game was a great hit and of course warranted another sequel. Next up came the gold standard of wrestling games, the N64's WWF No Mercy. Released in late 2000, No Mercy became one of Nintendo's top 50 best-selling games. The game's simple but realistic control system and a creator wrestler system that allowed an infinite number of combinations, No Mercy is still played today on emulators and of course the N64. Of course, many have moved from the generic game and now have improved it with various mods. Which mods are the best? Well, check out our recent video on it. But while the graphics could be wonky at times, the game's staying power is a testament to its playability and overall quality. After a bumper crop of games in 2000, 2001 only saw 3 releases, with one of them being the often neglected PC market. In 2001, THQ released WWF with Authority, later changed to WWE with Authority after WWF was forced to get the F out. Its first PC game since 1996 is In Your House, though this was an exclusive game. WWF with Authority was a much different game than the previous wrestling games, as it was an online collectible card game, similar to how the collectible card game Magic the Gathering would go digital. The game was available as a free download, or you could pay for the CD version, which was $5. The CD even came with a code for a William Regal starter playbook. What's a playbook, you ask? A playbook was a pre-constructed set of moves and such for specific superstars, while booster books cost $3 and included extra moves, counters, and specials to help your character in their match. Although the game's graphics were non-existent, the gameplay was highly praised as it allowed players to use strategy to maximize their character's moves. For example, a high flyer would use his aerial abilities and dodging skills to keep a muscle man at bay. Unlike some wrestling games where there was a little difference in game mechanics based on size and abilities, for example X-Pac slamming the Big Show, WWF with Authority took every aspect of a wrestler's size and abilities into consideration. The game was played online and players were ranked based on wins, losses, and whether they completed matches or bailed out when they were losing. Cards could be traded online, which also enhanced the playability. Several expansion packs were released, but by early 2003, THQ stopped producing cards and it shut down the online server several months later. 2001 also saw a game release exclusively for the Game Boy Color, with THQ releasing WWF Betrayal, another wrestling themed game that didn't feature actual wrestling. WWF Betrayal was a fighting game more like Double Dragon, with a player selecting Triple H, The Undertaker, The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin to use in a quest to rescue a kidnapped Stephanie McMahon, with Mr. McMahon promising a WWF Championship match if they managed to rescue Stephanie. The game is everything you'd expect from an 8-bit side-scroller and could be completed rather quickly. With average gameplay, average video and sound, the game scored average ratings. Nintendo's Game Boy Advance opened up video and audio capabilities, which had gamers interested in how WWF Road to WrestleMania would perform. Unlike Betrayal, this was a straight-up wrestling game, with players competing through a season, winning the WWF's various championships on their journey to the Showcase of the Immortals. The gameplay was likened to the Fire Pro Wrestling series, but was criticized for its limited graphics and sound. Thanks to the Game Boy's Advance Link Cable feature, you could compete with 3 other players. There are 24 wrestlers to choose from and a decent variety of matches, including your standard match, King of the Ring, Iron Man, Royal Rumble, cage matches, and a pay-per-view mode. Add in tag team, triple threat, and handicap matches, and there is enough variety for all that important replay factor. The lack of Create a Wrestler mode may disappoint, but it shouldn't be a deal breaker for wrestling gamers looking for a good handheld wrestling game. 2002 closed out with THQ's PlayStation 2 game WWF SmackDown Just Bring It, which would be the last game in the SmackDown series with WWF in the title. The game proved popular, selling 400,000 copies, with a solid roster beginning with 36 superstars, as players could unlock others by defeating them in matches. Just Bring It also allowed greater control with wrestlers, as players could alter their moveset and now have 2 finishers. The fighting mechanics from SmackDown 2 were retained, which meant players had to time their offense precisely. Game-wise, Just Bring It opened things up with more matches than ever, including a Hell in a Cell and TLC, while adding an incredibly sophisticated AI referee of Earl Hebner. For example, if a player attacks Earl, the referee could officiate the rest of the match with a clear bias towards them. During tag matches, players trying to run in without a tag could quickly find Hebner getting physical with them to prevent their interference. The game allows players to fight in the crowds, and hardcore matches can lead to backstage brawls, adding to gameplay. Just Bring It also featured a detailed story mode that allowed players to interact with other wrestlers, including dialogue boxes that determined what could happen next. The addition of commentary was a long time coming, but the commentary by Michael Cole and Taz should have been left off, as it was terrible, with both men uttering the most random lines.
I've never seen a fight like this before! Will anybody be able to defeat Kane?
Where's the defense?
Despite the crappy commentary, Just Bring It was one of the PS2's most solid offerings, and it's easy to see why it proved such a success. While the WWE dominated the wrestling game market, much as they did the wrestling industry, fans' options were limited to games such as Legends of Wrestling, but the release of new gaming systems such as the Xbox offered more capabilities. What would come of these, however? Well, join us next time for part 3 of WrestleGamia's look at the evolution of WWE video games. Let us know what your favourite game of this era was. So subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling video game content.